We begin with Irish MEPs who are returning to Brussels this week to push for stricter food safety measures under the Mercosur trade deal. They want to ensure products meet EU standards and do not contain illegal or harmful growth promoters. They plan to meet colleagues from other countries, including Italy and France, where MPs are reported to be wavering. The deal, of course, was provisionally approved by EU member states last week. And at the weekend, thousands of farmers and supporters, along with representatives from the country's MEPs, gathered for a rolling tractor protest in Athlone. That was on Saturday, part of a national demonstration and rally there to protest against the trade agreement. The Independent Ireland MEP Ciarán Mullooly says he will call on colleagues to remove South American meat imports as part of the agreement.
We have to ensure first and foremostly food is coming in is safe to eat and that we do not have illegal and carcinogenic growth promoters being used. We are in favour of trade and exporting. I say we must have this exporting of meat from the Mercosur countries. I think we should move forward by suspending that element of the trade agreement. Suspend the sale of all meat from South America.
We're joined now in studio by the Tulla-based Fianna Minister of State Timmy Dooley and by the Scariff-based Independent Ireland South MEP and farmer Michael McNamara. Gents, a very good morning to both of you. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Morning, Alan. I should say I'm not a member of Independent Ireland, but I am independent.
The Independent
was going to be a revelation.
The Independent Break Ireland South MEP.
Yeah. Thank you. Very important distinction.
Oh, very, very, very. Timmy, we'll start with yourself. That protest in Athlone over the weekend, thousands of farmers there, many from Clare as well, clearly angry and frustrated. Do you accept that many feel the government let them down on Mercosur?
Well, I know that the farmers are very concerned about the potential for the impact of beef from South America on the market. I don't think they're angry with the government. They obviously, different people have their own political persuasions, but as you know, when the programme for government was agreed around this time last year, or during the course of the beginning of last year, we made it very clear in the programme for government, the parties that came together with a number of independents, that the Mercosur deal as existed then, we didn't have and wouldn't support it. We didn't have confidence in it and we wouldn't support it. And over the past year, efforts have been made to modify the agreement, modify the concerns of the Irish people, more particularly the Irish farmers and the government, from a food safety point of view, but more particularly from an environmental standards perspective. And notwithstanding the negotiations and discussions that went on during that period of time, Ireland was not convinced and subsequently has indicated and voted no last Friday.
Can I just say to you, you said that you don't think farmers were angry with the government, but Eddie Punch, the former General Secretary of the ICSA, was in with us last week, and of course a farmer in Cratloe himself, speaking about it, and he offered a differing point. Let's just have a listen.
For most of 2025 and in recent weeks, it's been very hard to discern what they were going to do. Micheál Martin has said no this morning, but in a previous interview in China, he was all over the place and couldn't tell us what his position was. There was constant equivocation over the last year by government spokespeople who said they weren't happy with the deal as it stands yet. But there is no way of sugarcoating it that the Mercosur deal is a disaster for Irish agriculture. It's a disaster for rural communities.
He doesn't sound happy, and doesn't sound happy with the government. And particularly, he felt the government and Micheál Martin were kind of prevaricating on taking a position, and that they waited too late in the day to take a firm position on this.
Eddie Punch is not independent here. Eddie Punch contested the last general election. He contested the last European election. Eddie Punch is involved in politics in opposition to the government. So let's put that in context there. To say that everyone is against Mercosur is untrue. There are some positive aspects to Mercosur, not on the beef side, that's for sure, but there are people in the dairy sector who see opportunities in Mercosur for cheese and for other products. In the pharmaceutical sector, there are opportunities, but the government, in looking at all of it, wanted to ensure that they would protect the Irish beef sector and voted against it. Now, what Eddie seems to believe that the government should have been shouting from the rooftops, government was in negotiation around a comprehensive trade deal, which is really important to Ireland and to Europe. And so the negotiations are done behind closed doors at European level. The discussions and the diplomacy goes on at that level. And I know a little bit about this myself because last November, I visited China as part of an agri-food trade mission in the first instance in relation to the fishing sector, but also in relation to re-establishing the market for beef, because it had been closed since September 2024. This morning, the Chinese, following on from that mission, together with the Taoiseach visiting just last week, have announced that they're opening up the access for Irish beef to the Chinese market again. So Eddie didn't hear that shouted from the rooftops because there was diplomacy going on behind the scenes. So the negotiations were ongoing on this. They reached a conclusion last week where the Taoiseach said, OK, we've reached a conclusion to the negotiations and therefore we're not happy with that, so we're voting no.
I want to bring Michael in here. Michael, your view, would you be more of Eddie's line of thinking? Did Fianna Fáil and the government wait too long to take a position on this?
Timmy will be more privy to what was going on in the cabinet and what was motivating decisions than I would be, or indeed than Eddie would be. But it does appear from the outside that the independents in government, in particular Michael Healy-Rae, but also Marion Harkin and others, forced the government's hand and forced them to come out and actually say no, that they were going to vote no. That's how it appears from the outside. What was actually going on behind closed doors, of course, who knows. But there did, while it wasn't the programme for government, and again it was a key demand of the independents, but also it has to be said, both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in the run into the general election were very unequivocal and said that they would vote no to it. Their position did seem to change between the formation of the election and the formation of a government, and there was a lot more equivocation. Simon Harris was asked a couple of times and refused to say what exactly they would do. Micheál Martin talked about the nitrates derogation, and there was a suggestion that there was kind of a deal done or a quid pro quo, or at least some people felt that was what was being suggested. In any event, he wasn't categorical, and it did appear from the outside that it was the independents forced them to get off the fence.
But the protest on Saturday, you were there. What did that level of turnout tell you about how serious this issue is on the ground? But also, ultimately, will this protest be in vain, given the way the tide seems to be moving?
Okay, well, I suppose it tells you that farmers are disenchanted, but that's not news to anybody. I mean, they're facing more and more regulation around animal welfare, around environment. That's been the only direction of travel from the EU since, more or less, since Ireland joined, for at least 40 years. And now that's been undermined and undercut by this agreement, which is about selling German cars. And there's a variety of reasons why German cars aren't being sold. They're too expensive to produce. Their energy policy is disastrous in my view, but it's their policy. The Chinese have developed better electric cars, and fundamentally Germany stopped making quality cars. I mean, Volkswagen cars do not last. They were once built to last a lifetime. My personal experience is they last now until the 3-year warranty is up, like every other car. So there's a variety of reasons, and this is all about selling German cars, and to undercut, farmers feel undercut by that. I mean, the Germans are in the Parliament and elsewhere are really pushing this. Von der Leyen, as President of the Commission, should be acting on behalf of the entirety of the Union. There are questions over whether she's acting more in the interests of certain countries than countries in the periphery, and that's beginning to fray that coalition. There's always an element of
inevitability like that about that, though, that she'll always be more in line with the bigger countries, the bigger members, the bigger states.
I would say Germany and its allies more than the bigger countries. I mean, France is a very big country. France is against Mercosur. There's all this talk in the Irish media about, oh God, we've blotted our copybook. Nobody will talk to us anymore. It's terrible. Our ambassador won't be invited to morning coffee this morning.
You're clearly scoffing at that notion, because it was reported the weekend that Ursula von der Leyen was expressing her deep annoyance with Ireland behind the scenes.
Of course she's annoyed, because they're not towing the line for her, and she's used to Ireland towing the line. But I mean, France didn't tow the line for her. Poland, Donald Tusk, a former president of the council.
Is it easier for those bigger countries like France and to a lesser extent Poland to not tow the line?
Austria is another country which is German speaking. It was even part of Germany in almost in Ursula von der Leyen's lifetime. Didn't tow the line. I mean, it's not unusual. It might be slightly unusual for Ireland to stand up for its interests in Brussels, but it's not unusual for countries to stand up for their interests in Brussels.
Timmy, has Ireland blotted its copybook on this, or, as Michael is saying, did the government look at it and say, well, look, we may irk Ursula von der Leyen, but given the scenario here, it's a gamble worth taking?
No, but it's not about a gamble. It's just the Irish position is very clear. We wanted to protect our beef sector, our rural communities are really important to an Irish way of life, and we want to protect the jobs that are associated with that. So we were right to assert our authority. Now, unfortunately, as I think we've indicated, this deal is probably going to go ahead. I don't want to sort of second guess what might happen at European Parliament. Michael, I know full well what goes on there.
The Taoiseach says it's not a done deal, although he did say
well, I think that
it
maybe
feels
refers
like it's more than
to
likely
the
to pass.
potential for small changes to be made in terms of how we might apply certain rules here, and that's open for discussion hereafter. But it looks like as if the deal is going to go ahead, and I think we were right to set out what was in Ireland's interest. I think the community, European community, should work on the basis of every country coming to the table. There's a voting system for a reason. We are democratic and we accept the outcome of those decisions. But we shouldn't feel that we have to go cap in hand. There's been a suggestion by some that that's what Ireland has done. Quite the opposite, actually. It has asserted its rights. But I would also want to put on the record that there are some potential benefits. And I know Michael has mentioned the automotive sector in Germany as being a potential benefactor. I'm not fully sure about that. But if you look up the road in Tuam, there's a company up there who produce, I think they employ about 1,000 people. They produce electronic components for the German car market. Companies like that will benefit. There are opportunities too in the dairy sector here, in the liqueur sector. We have whisky makers here in County Clare and across Munster. So there's positives, and that's why some have suggested it was equivocation on behalf of the government, and it wasn't. It was about how do you get the benefits from this deal and protect those sectors that are most important to you. And that's what has gone on over the last 12 months in a quiet diplomatic way, trying to make changes. Some changes were made.
But there are farmers who are saying this deal undermines them directly, even if the government is arguing that Ireland's going to benefit hugely from free trade.
Absolutely. There are real concerns, and that's why we're voting no. There are real concerns about the impact that it would have on the beef sector. But over the last 12 months, we were trying to see, could we make improvements on the beef side that wouldn't put Irish farmers at a disadvantage, so that somehow we might be able to get the benefits out.
Okay, Michael, you want to
able to do that.
The reality is, every time RT are talking about climate change and emissions in Ireland, there's a picture of a cow on the television screen, and we're told that the destruction of the rainforest is very bad, which I think everybody accepts it is. But this deal incentivises the destruction of the rainforest, because the rainforest is being cut down to provide large tracts of land to grow palm oil, but also for cattle ranches in Brazil and other countries. So we're incentivising that which we say is bad. We're saying Irish farmers are bad for having cattle, but it's okay to cut down the rainforest and to make space for ever bigger ranches where antibiotics are, including ones with carcinogenic effect, are routinely and growth hormones are routinely given to cattle, not even without prescription. And that's all fine. And that beef is going to come into Europe, and Irish farmers are going to have to compete with that. That's simply what farmers are outraged about, and their outrage is, I think, well founded.
Are they going to give the government any credit though? If ultimately, the agreement passes, will farmers say, "Well, we're annoyed, but at least we're happy with the government. They did vote no. They stood up for us." Or will they I'll go back to my earlier point about, will they say the government flip-flopped on this a little bit? If they'd been a little bit firmer and said, stayed with the no stance from the outset, maybe it might have had a different outcome.
Fianna Fáil is the most popular party in Ireland at the last general election. Fine Gael was next. A high proportion of farmers, just like every other constituent part of society, vote for those parties and probably will continue to do so regardless of this deal, in my opinion. I could be wrong with that, but farmers are annoyed right now. Whether that would, even if there was an election tomorrow morning, it'd be interesting to see what happens. There's a farming community in Galway West. Will there be a by-election coming up there? We'll see how it impacts on the voting. People's annoyance doesn't always, sometimes it does impact on the voting, but it doesn't always. So we'll see
what do farmers do next then, if the vote passes?
All I can tell you is what I'll be doing next. I'll be continuing to work with like-minded MEPs from across the political spectrum in Europe, from the left right across to the right. In my own grouping, there's a Belgian MEP that I've worked very closely with for a long time, Benoit Cassar. I was at a march down in the south of Belgium with himself and the Agriculture Commissioner last summer. I will work with him, and I will work with fellow MEPs to see, first of all, if we can get a resolution passed to refer the legality of this agreement to the European Court to determine, because most trade agreements up to now have to be passed by all national parliaments, including CETA. This one was national parliaments were intentionally excluded from this because von der Leyen knew full well that they would block it. So while on the one hand she talks about democracy and the essential respect for democracy and how bad countries are that don't respect democracy, how we need to respect national parliaments.
Actions speak louder than words.
And then on the other hand she cuts them out of this decision making. So we want to refer the question of whether that's lawful to the court. That might slow it down. It might not. If that is referred, then ultimately, if it is found to be lawful, it will come back to the Parliament to ratify, and I will continue to work up until that vote is taken. I agree with Timmy. It's more likely than not that it would pass, at least today. But a week is a long time in politics, and von der Leyen's making enemies at an alarming rate in Europe, including in the Parliament. So who knows? I certainly wouldn't predict what will happen, but if the vote is tomorrow, I think it'd be more likely than not. But it could be a year before this comes back to the Parliament, particularly if the court get to look at it, in which case a lot could have changed.
Final word to you on this, Timmy. Is time on Ireland's side in this? What can the government do, if anything, now to influence that outcome?
Well, I think it has moved to the European Parliament, as Michael has identified, and I think Michael, in his opposition at European Parliament, will be joined by certainly, I think, most, if not all, certainly most of the Fianna Fáil members, and I suspect Fine Gael as well, and a number of independents.
Most, I think, not all.
Not all, but I think the vast majority of the Irish representatives from the main political parties and most of the independents will vote against it there, and I know they will be working. I spoke to both Billy Kelleher and Barry Cowan over the weekend. They'll be working, like Michael, with their colleagues in various different groupings to try and build a resistance. But we have to be honest, at the moment that looks a challenge. Now what Michael is talking about there in maybe bringing a legal challenge, that may have some potential positive benefits, but it'd be at this stage it's hard to see that it could be defeated as it currently stands at the European Parliament.
If it pans out the way and ultimately it passes and subsequently we see Irish beef prices fall sharply, will the government accept responsibility for the consequences?
But I mean, this isn't government responsibility. The government has worked to try to I suppose change the deal that would, in a way that wouldn't impact on farmers. They have made some progress on that, but not enough, and then voted against it. So like this deal didn't emanate in Ireland. This was a European deal that's been around for 20 odd years, in the making 20 years, 15 certainly, and I think the government have worked to the best of its ability together with others to try to make changes that we could see the benefits of Mercosur and not see the harmful impacts which certainly are potential on the beef side. Notwithstanding the significant changes that have been made, they're not enough to modify or mollify our concerns.
Okay. We do have to leave it there. My thanks, gents, to both of you for coming into studio this morning, Timmy Dooley and Michael McNamara.